This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome once again from Johannesburg here in South Africa. I'm Eben Jansen. The show is very much live, broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now with the whole show available all day on demand on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it in the office a little bit later. Today, we look at the appointment of soccer boss Danny Jordaan as the new mayor of the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality. We also look at the economy with interest rates expected to remain unchanged this week. That's what the experts say. We'll speak to someone about that shortly. Then, later, fetal alcohol syndrome continues to decimate our communities. We also get updates from Burundi and John Block's case. That's before the courts in Kimberley today. But first, let's get the day's news from Anindo Mel.
Good morning, I'm Anindo Mel. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. The EFF has called on Danny Jordaan to resign from the South African Football Association. This following his new appointment as Nelson Mandela Bay Mayor. The association has said Jordaan will remain its president despite his appointment yesterday as Mayor of the Metro in Port Elizabeth. He will be able to stay on as his position is part-time. The DA has meanwhile labelled Jordaan's appointment as nothing more than a pre-election gimmick by the ANC. Jordaan will become the troubled municipality's fourth mayor in 6 years. Eskom is keeping mum on how much has been spent on former Chief Executive Tshediso Matona's financial exit package. Yesterday, the utility announced it mutually agreed to part ways on an amicable basis and that no misconduct is alleged against Matona. Eskom says the sum Matona will be paid as part of his exit package would be made public when at the end of the year report is released. Former tennis champion Bob Hewitt will be back in court today. Hewitt will apply for leave to appeal against his 6-year sentence for rape and sexual assault. He was sentenced in the High Court in Pretoria yesterday for the crimes he committed in 1981 and 1982. Leaders of the Great Lakes states have urged the government of Burundi to postpone next month's presidential election indefinitely. This follows weeks of violent protests against President Pierre Nkurunziza's bid to run for a third term. South Africa, Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania have been mandated to mediate between the Burundian government, opposition parties and civil society organizations for a peaceful resolution.
The summit here has felt that the postponement should not be given time frame because people are dying right now. Whether you have your constitution with very clear time frames, you can't just force it, even if people are fighting. You just say go and vote when people are leaving the country in many ways.
We also called on all parties to refrain from violence, to allow us to enhance dialogue between all parties with the hope of reaching a consensus that is acceptable, most importantly to the people of Burundi, that respects their constitution.
And a state of emergency has been declared in Colombia after a huge landslide struck the country. Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos says authorities don't know how many people are missing in the landslide, which has killed more than 60 people. Residents of the western city of Salga say houses were swept away by mud and rocks following heavy rain. Well, remember, you can find more of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Eben, back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Janine. Now, big changes were afoot in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metropolitan Council after the ANC announced new mayoral and deputy mayoral candidates for the Metro. SAFA President and Port Elizabeth resident Danny Jordaan was nominated as the new mayoral candidate for the city. He will replace the 83-year-old Ben Fiedler. The changes were announced by the ANC after its top brass, led by Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, returned to Port Elizabeth to implement interventions after studying a report by the ANC task team appointed to rectify the problems within the party there. Now, our very own reporter Yuri Blichner joins us live from Port Elizabeth to give us a little bit of an update and a little bit of reaction. Very good morning, Yuri. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, good morning, Eben, and good morning to the viewers.
Yuri, the overall reaction to the appointment of especially Danny Jordan as executive mayor there, what has it been like so far?
Well, obviously, we've heard the ANC side and a lot of the reasonings for the decisions they've made and the people they've brought in. The official opposition here in the Metro, the Democratic Alliance, they were quick to react, just calling this a pre-election gimmick, saying that the ANC is running scared, and even a guy of the stature of Danny Jordan with all his knowledge is not just one person that needs to come in and actually change and redress the problems that is very deep-seated here in the Metro. So they're not really concerned about the decisions that have been made. We are yet to hear from the organised business community here in Nelson Mandela Bay, although they have been very vocal and critical of some of the decisions and some of the goings on in the Metro. I'm sure later today they will also come forward and put forward a formal reaction to the decision that's made. Just from what we've seen in the street, looking at Twitter, looking at the newspapers this morning, there seems to be varied response from the public, from people saying the timing is incorrect, this should have been done a long time ago, to other people saying, yes, they're glad something's happening, that somebody of a stature of a Danny Jordan is coming in, somebody with the institutional knowledge and also the capabilities on an administrative level to start getting change and affect change here in the Metro. And as we've heard earlier in your program, with the EFF coming out saying they're requesting Danny to stand down from his position at SAFA. We'll see what happens, what this day will still bring.
Port Elizabeth and Nelson Mandela Bay, they support their own, they idolize their own people, really, who've made a name on the national stage. This could be a really shrewd political move ahead of the elections to bring Port Elizabeth's favourite son really in to lead the ANC there.
Well, the decision made by the ANC to change the leadership here in the Metro, they've obviously thought very hard and very long about it. The change in leadership process, last week you saw President Zuma here with the NWC members. They were then given that technical report which they studied. Then they took the whole week. They also probably took this decision to the NEC they had over the weekend to make the decision. So yes, probably a shrewd move, getting somebody in here who knows Port Elizabeth, somebody who has struggle credentials. Danny Jordan has been a member of parliament already, so he understands the political structures. He also understands the administrative structures, but he doesn't have any experience, though, in local government. That's something that he might find difficult initially. A lot of talk has also been made about the so-called coloured vote, which the ANC wants to sort of gain back here in the Metro. This is where the DA has made a lot of inroads over the last few years. There's a bit of a split view on that one, that he would actually succeed in doing that, whereas a lot of people say what is needed is somebody that brings back real change, somebody that can affect service delivery happening, delivery of houses, delivery of sanitation, water, those kind of things, which will actually get people to vote. Because if you look at a little bit of the history of the Metro, in 2006, the ANC got 67% of the vote. Then you bring that back down, then that dropped to about 52% in the 2011 local government elections. Now, then if you look at the last national elections we had and you isolate the Metro vote, the ANC only got just more than 48% of the vote, where the DA managed to get 42% of the vote. So there's been a decline in ANC support and a definite rise in support for the DA. So this is a gradual process, so it's not a knee-jerk reaction by the voters, more like a measured approach by them. And I think bringing in some strong leadership back into the ANC here. The idea behind this, as Gwede also said yesterday in the press conference, it's not about getting the coloured votes, it's about getting somebody back in to start to deliver the service, so people actually start voting for the party because they believe the party is doing something right for them, rather than voting for a personality.
We've heard lots of stories about the challenges facing the Nelson Mandela Bay Metropolitan Council. Danny Jordan is coming in. What are the key challenges you think that he would have to overcome in the short term and in the run-up to the municipal elections?
Well, we can split that up. First of all, there will be a political challenge. There will also be the challenge of service delivery. I will deal with the latter quickly first. Housing is a big issue here in the Nelson Mandela Bay, with a massive shortage and a big influx of people. Now, we've just seen recently that the National Department of Human Settlements have actually taken over the human settlements component of the city when the Minister Lindiwe Sisulu announced a 4.6 billion rand program over the next 4 years to build more than 15,000 houses here in the Metro. But that process will be run from from a national side and from the Department of Cooperative Governance side, also with the Treasury, with the municipality just being the conduit for that. What they do try to do there is get these houses built and make sure that these things are built. They're also going to plan to service 15,000 stands with bulk infrastructure for future housing developments. And a big issue in and amongst all this is the dreaded bucket system. Here in the metro, more than 20,000 buckets are still in use. And that has actually risen over the last few years. And that's an area where the ANC have always wanted to get into and get that out and get proper sanitation into the system. So those are the kind of things that Daniel Don will have to deal with. The other thing is the water supply issue, which is a major thing. Recently, the Department of Water has said to the metro here that we'll have to decrease our overall usage by 15%, or we might face a water shortage in the near term, in the near future. Now, linked to that, reports have shown and research has shown that nearly just over 30% of the clean water coming into the city goes lost through theft and a leaky water system. So those are the infrastructural things that needs to be addressed. Then we get onto the political side. We've seen the 31-man task team led by Charles Ngakula that was put in place here in the metro in January. Now, that was done after the Regional Executive Committee was disbanded because of political infighting and instability within the metro. And part of that job is to get the branches on the ground, which are in a bit of a state of disarray, back into action, get those branch numbers up, the ANC membership numbers up, so they can actually constitute then a regional conference to go forward and elect new regional leadership. And by doing that, strengthening the structures of the ANC to get them moving forward politically again, and ultimately then see those votes on the table.
Yuri, thank you very much for that update. That is Yuri Plichner coming to you live from Port Elizabeth. Just to recap on that story, now the South African Football Association says Daniel Don will remain its president despite him being named the mayor of the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. SAFA says he will be able to stay on as his current position is part-time. Don will replace the 83-year-old Ben Fiedler, becoming the troubled municipality's fourth mayor in 6 years.
The ANC's great hope that SAFA boss Danny Jordan can reverse its fortunes in the coveted Nelson Mandela Bay Metro in the same way that he managed to turn around the soccer body and give South Africans one of the world's greatest sporting events. ANC Secretary General Gwede Mantashe says this is the first phase of the party's turnaround strategy in the Metro, which is set to be hotly contested in the next year's local government elections.
We'll also undertake the review of the mayoral committee, whether we have the best mayoral committee in place. Once there is a proper executive structure in the municipality, there are areas that will need particular focus and changes in the executive itself.
The DA has dismissed Jordan's appointment as a pre-election gimmick, but Mantashe dismissed such talk.
I know that when we effect changes, many people will always go in time and talk about local government elections in 2016. That is not the driving factor. The driving factor is that the people of this metro need efficiency and delivery of quality services.
Jordan will also have a new deputy mayor and chief whip. Abongile Dumago, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.
Let's just take a look at some of your views. What are you saying around the appointment of Danny Jordan? Circuit Lejo says, is Danny Jordan a politician? Well, I think he's always been a politician. You have to be quite a good one to be involved in football. I congratulate the former ANC regional chairperson of the NMB for being appointed as new mayor of that municipality, says General Vladimir. Bonisile Faith says, I didn't know that Danny Jordan has a political background. He does. He's always been. He's been a member of parliament. Stiger says, at least now we can call Danny Jordan MJ. Not Michael Jordan, though, but Mayor Jordan, says Stiger. Tsiepe Ratoni says, I think Danny Jordan must resign his position from SAFA, CAF and FIFA. How is he going to manage, or is it going to be by remote? Those are some of your views. We love your interactions at SABC Newsroom, is where you can tell us what you think about whatever's going on in South Africa right now. Now, pressing issue it is. The Monetary Policy Committee at the South African Reserve Bank is expected to leave interest rates unchanged when it meets on Thursday this week. At least that's what they say. South African economic growth is expected to rise gradually over the medium term, reaching 3% by 2017. Now, recent trends have led to understandable concern about the country's growth prospects. Change in estimates was as a result of proposed government initiatives such as promoting savings, salvaging the country's ailing power utility, and boosting private sector investments. High unemployment, threats of industrial action, and pending retrenchments, especially in the mining sector, are likely to constrain 2015 prospects for growth. Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene also said fast economic growth was crucial to the country's national development plan. The greatest challenge so far remains creating employment, overcoming poverty, and reducing inequality. Now, to give us a little insight into what the world of finance is thinking, well, we have Nedbank's chief economist, Mr. Dennis Dykes, with us this morning. Good morning, Mr. Dykes. Thank you for joining us.
Morning.
Do you support the move to leave interest rates unchanged when the meeting happens on Thursday?
Yeah, look, I think the Monetary Policy Committee is very focused on what's going to happen to inflation. At the moment, it's fairly low, but we think that the next number is going to come out around about 5%, so it's starting to trend higher. And the Reserve Bank has already indicated that it's going to go through 6%, which is the upper target range, in the first quarter of next year, but that's really on what we call base considerations, the low oil price in the earlier this year compared to where it will be later, early next year. So that's not too much of a concern, but nevertheless, inflation is going to remain fairly high. I think the other concern as to why they might think of actually tightening over time is really what is going to happen to the rand when US interest rates start rising. But fundamentally, on domestic considerations, you would not really think that you should be raising interest rates now. Quite the contrary, as you indicated, there are all sorts of economic problems. Credit growth is very weak. And ideally, I think they'd like to keep interest rates unchanged for as long as they can.
Labour would certainly want to see that. There are concerns within Labour that an increase would really affect Labour quite badly at this time, and we're also heading into strike season.
Yeah, look, I think for everyone concerned, business, households, the labour sector, clearly you want to keep interest rates as low as possible, unless, of course, you start to actually see signs of credit bubbles and asset bubbles and so forth. But as I indicated, that's really not the case. So, you know, I think this is one time when Labour and business see completely eye to eye. Let's keep interest rates as low as possible.
Let's keep it as low as possible for now. I wanted to ask you, one of the key concerns, I think, right now in South Africa, in people who look at business and the markets and so forth, that strike season is looming, and the early murmurs are not very positive. Again, there's a big gap, it seems, between capital and labour. What would happen if we, to the South African wider economy, if we see another extended strike season like we had last year?
Well, last year was devastating. We had the 5-month strike in the platinum sector, and then it was followed by National Union of Metal Workers as well, striking over a 6 to 2 month period. So I estimate last year we lost about 0.5% of GDP, which is a very, very considerable number. And unfortunately, we've seen the medium-term effects coming through now, job losses in the platinum sector and so forth. The two areas at the moment that we're concerned about would be the public sector workers, and then, of course, the gold mining sector, where we've already had an opening shot that they want to double the minimum wage in that sector, which I think, again, would be extremely devastating. So I hope that we're not going to see what we saw last year. Gold is smaller than platinum, both from an export and a GDP point of view, but nevertheless it would be very devastating, particularly at this time when the economy is under so much pressure.
What can we do to avert that in especially the gold mining sector this time around?
Look, I personally think that we've got to have some sort of compact where when things are going really well in the sector, workers get an increase in share, and maybe that's an equity share, something of that sort. But at times like we've seen at the moment, where the gold price is under pressure, where the mining industry is under all sorts of pressure as a result of electricity, etc., where there's some flexibility. So really, I think you've got to keep minimum wages relatively low, but have an increase in share of profit when things go well.
Well, that sounds almost sage-like in a way. I wanted to ask you about your outlook for 2015. How do you see the country deal with all the challenges that we're facing? And at times it can almost be a little bit overwhelming for the man in the street to see what is going on. Is there a little bit of light?
Well, the light depends on Eskom.
Oh, that's short and sweet, isn't it?
But look, I think the short term very difficult because we've still got Koeberg Power Station out. We've still got difficulties at other power stations. But I think over the next couple of weeks, hopefully the first unit of Medupi will come online, hopefully. And we'll also see Koeberg being recommissioned after some maintenance work. So that will take off the short-term pressure, but there's no doubt that's acting as a constraint. What I would like to see is, much more private sector participation, not necessarily privatization of Eskom, but deregulation, opening up so that you and I even can sell into the electricity grid and we make it a much more open system. And that, I think, could generate a lot of fixed investment spending, could actually alleviate the electricity shortage a lot quicker. But for the moment, it looks like we've got about 2% economic growth this year.
So the light at the end of the tunnel is an oncoming train, says Mr. Dykes. Thank you for joining us this morning to give us a little insight into what will be another big week in the world of the markets. I thank you once again. That is Nedbank's chief economist, Mr. Dennis Dykes, joining us talking about, the outlook for 2015. The outlook is good, depending what side of the coin you are on. Anyhow, let's take a look at what is our picture of the day. And today, well, it comes from Agence France Presse. It's captioned the death toll from the massive Columbia landslide. It's now risen to 61. There you have a young woman cleaning out, what looks like the outside of a house after that deadly landslide there in the last 24 hours. 61 people are now feared dead. But let's take a look at the front pages from around the globe. We start in Europe. The Times there reports that Iranian-backed Shia soldiers streamed towards Ramadi yesterday, vying to retake the city from Islamic State. The Islamic State, as Iraq's government sought to reverse its worst defeat in a year. Move to Cuba, the Diario Las Americas. There you will see a massive landslide that tore through Salga in Colombia before dawn, killing 48 people. That number has now moved up to 61 and injuring a further 27. Finally, in Israel, the Jerusalem Post, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu would like the peace process with the Palestinians to resume soon, he said in closed conversations with Likud officials last week. Well, back home, let's take a look at what's happening around our country. We start here in Johannesburg, where 2 police officers and 2 informers from Springs are expected to appear in the Carltonville court for their bail application. This for the murder of 3 suspects. And in the Pretoria High Court, where former tennis star Bob Hewitt is expected to apply for leave to appeal his conviction on 2 counts of rape and 1 of sexual assault. Yesterday, he was sentenced to 6 years in jail and fined 100,000 rand. And in Cape Town, still in Cape Town, the sentencing procedures in the trial of the 28th gang boss, George Geweld Thomas, is expected to be handed down in the High Court. Last week, Thomas was found guilty on no less than 53 charges, including 7 for murder. Now, it's not always easy to catch a fish, especially at night, but a video of a group of fishermen in Lebanon has lit up social media after they attempted to catch these fish at night, using dynamite. I think that's a little bit over the top, but take a look. What do you think? Well, that's a simple way to catch fish, isn't it? Time for us to take a short break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
What's up, peeps? I heard some people don't bother voting. They say it makes no difference. If only they knew. Nearly 400 councillors won by fewer than 250 votes in the last local elections. One vote is all it takes to win an award, and that one vote is mine. Boom!
Welcome back. You're still watching Newsroom. Now, as Burundi's President Pierre Nkurunziza has dismissed his defense and foreign ministers after last week's failed military coup, more than 110,000 people have fled the country as the political crisis there deepens. Now, to give us the latest, we are joined on the line from Nairobi by our East African correspondent, Sarah Kimani. Good morning to you, Sarah. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Sarah, just give us an update on the current situation in Bujumbura.
Well, today it's been quiet. We have not had reports of any protesters gathering to begin demonstrations like they did yesterday. However, yesterday the President Nkurunziza fired his defense and foreign ministers. That announcement coming just 5 days after he survived an attempted coup, and also coming days after those generals behind that coup were arrested and presented before court.
Now, Sarah, world leaders are calling for the general elections there to be postponed indefinitely. What effect do you think an election will have on the country if it continues as some ministers there want?
Well, one of the reasons the East African community and indeed the African Union and members of the international community have been asking for the election to be postponed is because of the chaos that has been in the country. They have felt that the environment is not conducive to have whether the parliamentary election scheduled for next week or the general election, the presidential election scheduled for end of June being held. They feel that also a lot of people will be disenfranchised because at least 105,000 people have left the country. The opposition has also not been able to campaign. A lot of the talk on politics has been centered around President Pierre Nkurunziza's third-term bid. And so they're asking that that is held and so that people can even sit on the table and have dialogue, political parties can agree. And even that his own party can choose another candidate because they insist that his third-term bid is unconstitutional.
Is there a chance that in the run-up to all of these discussions over the next couple of weeks that President Nkurunziza might surprise everyone and step down?
Well, it is unlikely that he's going to step down because he's relying on a court ruling that his first term does not count because he was appointed by Parliament and not elected in a popular vote. And so he's saying now he's only served one term, which is this one that is just coming to an end. And then he's saying now if he goes for what is popularly being known as a third term, he will be going for a second term. And he has promised that he will not resign again. But people feel that he's had his 10 years and it is time for him to go home. There are also fears that if he continues, then there's no freedom of the media, there's no freedom of association. The opposition parties and civil society organizations also say that during his term they have been clamped upon, they have not been able to carry on with their duties without political interference, and so they feel it is time for him to leave. And they're saying it will be very difficult to beat him in any election, saying that the Electoral Commission and other institutions in the country are not free and transparent.
Now, Sarah, there's also a developing humanitarian crisis. I think the latest report by the UN says about 110,000 people have fled the country. How are neighboring countries dealing with this escalating crisis, it seems?
It is especially difficult for Tanzania. Just now, the World Health Organization has released a statement indicating that a severe humanitarian crisis is developing in Tanzania, where they're saying about 90,000 people are camped in a small village called Kagunga, which just beginning of this year had 11,000 people and now has to shelter 90,000 people. They're saying facilities in the refugee camp called Nyarugusu are stretched, and so now people are being sheltered in schools, and a stadium has also been set aside to take in these numbers. We're talking about 500 to 2,000 people, refugees arriving from Burundi every day.
Well, Sarah, thank you very much for giving us an update there on the developing crisis in Burundi. That was Sarah Kamani coming to you live from Kenya. She's been traveling around the Great Lakes area in recent weeks to give us the very latest updates. But what are you talking about with regards to what is happening in Burundi in East Africa? Well, Nomfundo Engler says, Burundi elections postponed, ? Someone said that Nkurunziza staged that coup against himself for that very purpose. I wonder. Yes, there are many theories doing the rounds, I suppose. Wallace Mchiri says Nkurunziza's bluff called off. Al-Shabaab terrorist group has dismissed President Pierre Nkurunziza's claim that it is targeting Burundi. That one from Wallace. General Matic says, I don't think the postponement of the elections in Burundi is sufficient. The president must step down, says Washta Man. Josie Managa says, why can't the people of Burundi vote the president out in the next elections, then fighting each other? Well, because you can't stand for a third term by the Constitution. There's a wonderful picture, that picture coming out of Burundi. That is our pick of the day. Lovely picture there showing what's happening right there. Day-to-day life being affected by military intervention. Two boys holding each other there as they're walking the streets behind the military detail that you saw. Now, South Africa has the highest cases of fetal alcohol syndrome in the world. It is estimated that 6% of all South Africans have been diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. Although fetal alcohol syndrome is preventable, it continues to be a serious problem here in South Africa. The country's dangerous drinking patterns, especially by women, cost both local and national government billions of rands each year and puts a strain on the healthcare system. Rural areas in the Western Cape and towns in the Northern Cape, like the are set to be hardest hit by FAS. According to research by the Foundation for Alcohol-Related Research, binge drinking while pregnant continues to be the leading cause of fetal alcohol syndrome and not the DOP system as previously thought. Now, from our studios, we are joined by Liana Willifeed, who is the CEO of the Foundation for Alcohol-Related Research. A very good morning to you, Liana, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
It's very, very interesting, the research that you've done. Just tell us about this research and give us a little insight into the numbers. 6% of the entire population, that is massive, isn't it?
It's a massive problem. I think we need to keep in mind that South Africa has, like you correctly said, the highest reported rate of fetal alcohol syndrome in the world. And the emphasis is, of course, on reported rate because there are many countries where no research has been done up to date. But if we compare it with other countries, in America is the next country with a high reported rate, and they report a rate of only 3%. Now, compared to our 6%, it is very high, but we need to keep in mind also that there are communities in South Africa where the prevalence rate is as high as 18%. That means 18% of the population in that, or the people in that community, has got permanent brain damage due to alcohol use during pregnancy.
Now, most babies with FAS are in foster care. How does this affect the adoption rates in a country like South Africa?
The babies, it's a trend overseas, and especially in first world countries, you will find most of the babies, or a number of these babies, in foster care. Here in South Africa, and I'm sure it's the case in the rest of Africa, you find these babies in their birth homes with their biological parents. But of course, there are children who are placed out for adoption who might also be affected. And there are heartbreaking stories of families, couples waiting for years to adopt children, and then they adopt a child not knowing that the child has been exposed to alcohol prenatally, and then the child ends up having fetal alcohol syndrome. So it's a sad, sad story. The positive part of it is that the child ends up in a loving home with loving foster parents or adoptive parents who can then take care of the children. I think we also need to keep in mind that women don't drink intentionally to harm their children. The big problem and the scary problem with fetal alcohol syndrome is women often report their pregnancies very late. And right from conception, the alcohol starts affecting the cells of the unborn baby. And alcohol is like a poisonous substance to the cells of the unborn baby. And unfortunately, the brain of the unborn baby is very, very vulnerable to the harmful and poisonous effects of alcohol. So some parts of the brain might not even develop or might not develop properly.
How are we going to deal with this as a country? Is it time to import stricter laws with regards to selling and trading alcohol, or where bottle stores are situated and so forth? Will that even make a difference? How do we come to terms with this problem?
I think the only way that we are going to address this problem is by taking responsibility not only for your own child, but the child of a family member, the child of a friend. Because a lot of women don't see themselves as being at risk. They still tend to think other people are at risk and they're not at risk. People still think that women need to be an alcoholic or a very heavy drinker to have a child with fetal alcohol syndrome. Research just came out in the UK where children, unborn babies, were watched on ultrasound just after mums drank 1 glass of alcohol. And it's devastating to see the effect of the alcohol, 1 glass of alcohol, that it's having on an unborn baby. So we all need to take responsibility and get the message across to people: no, alcohol is safe during pregnancy. So when you start planning a pregnancy, it's better to abstain from alcohol.
And now the government launched Mum Connect, a system to try and help women engage with the health system through a kind of help desk tools and services. Has that helped, or is that helping?
Programs that can help to bring the message out to mums and to fathers of the unborn children will always help. So Mum Connect and our program that we are doing in the various communities that we work, the Healthy Mother, Healthy Baby program, where we work with pregnant women, never mind if they drink or not, all those programs help to bring the message across and to make people more aware of the dangers of alcohol use during pregnancy. And very importantly, getting and mobilizing community members to support pregnant women not to drink during pregnancy.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. That is Liana Ulifi, who's the CEO of the Foundation for Alcohol-Related Research. South Africa is still the country with the highest numbers of fetal alcohol syndrome in the world. That's amazing, isn't it? Well, let's take a look at what's happening on our Facebook page right now. You can read more about another high-ranking government official who's been given a golden handshake after being suspended. Former Eskom Chief Executive Tadiso Matona has been given a financial exit package. Then the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees says more than 110,000 people have fled Burundi as the political crisis deepens in the aftermath of a failed coup there. And thousands of Shiite militia prepare to fight Islamic State insurgents who seized the Iraqi provincial capital Ramadi at the weekend. The biggest defeat for government forces in more than a year there. Now, let's take a look at our tweet of the day. This one comes from Khama, who says, "Well done to Dr. Danny Jordaan for being appointed the new mayor of PE. A technocrat of his caliber will definitely improve the city. Hashtag salute. That one from Khama. Bona Khama it is. Time for us to take another short break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
We live in a digital era, and the number of Africans with mobile phones is rapidly increasing.
Twitter use is predominantly being done on smartphones. This is a very African phenomenon.
Here, there are constantly new innovative ways to make the internet more affordable. With that, we're seeing protests against governments proposing methods to limit access. On Network, we give you information about all of this. We also have new computers, games, and robots.
Join Siphumelele Zondi on Network every Sunday at 19:30 CAT.
South Africa is the third leading country globally in TB infections.
We have 9 million new cases occurring globally, and 30% of those cases are occurring in the African region.
And there are two broad kinds of drug-resistant TB, so to speak. The one is MDR TB, and the other is XDR TB.
To ensure that everyone who's diagnosed with TB is tested for HIV.
There's grossly inadequate funding for TB. Vaccine, drug and diagnostic research. We need a lot more.
Join me on Health Talk every Saturday morning between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. as we unpack current health stories.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's just have a look at the stories making headlines today. The EFF have called on Danny Jordan to resign from the South African Football Association. This following his new appointment as Nelson Mandela Bay Mayor. SAFA, however, says Jordan will be able to stay as his position is part-time. The DA has meanwhile labelled Jordan's appointment as nothing more than a pre-election gimmick by the ANC. Former tennis champion Bob Hewitt will be back in court today. Hewitt will apply for leave to appeal against his 6-year sentence for rape and sexual assault. He was sentenced in the High Court in Pretoria yesterday for the crimes he committed in 1981 and 1982. And a state of emergency has been declared in Colombia after a huge landslide struck the country. Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos says authorities don't know how many people are missing in the landslide, which has killed more than an estimated 50 people. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Janine. Now, two prominent cases are on the roll at the Northern Cape High Court today. One is the fraud and corruption case involving the ANC chair in the Northern Cape, John Block, and the party deputy secretary, Alvin Burtis, as well as their business associate, Christos Skolts. Block and Burtis are accused of using their political influence to secure government lease tenders for Trifecta at inflated prices. The other case there involves a 30-year-old Khalashewe man who's been found guilty of murder, rape and kidnapping of a 5-year-old girl last year. Ivan Matibe pleaded guilty to all charges, and today Judge Nombulelo Pagati will decide his fate. Now, our very own reporter Ulrich Hendricks is outside the High Court and joins us live. Good morning, Ulrich.
Good morning, Evan.
Ulrich, let's start with the Trifecta case. What happened in court yesterday, and what's your expectation for today?
Well, it's final arguments time. It's the state's got the first chance to basically tell or to try to convince the judge why she should find all the accused guilty. They basically painted a picture of a company, Trifecta, that has corrupt or that has politicians in their pockets, basically using those politicians to influence government tenders so that Trifecta can then benefit from those tenders. So they first focused on one of the deceased accused, Yolanda Botha, who died last year, her relationship with Trifecta, how she allegedly used the influence as the HOD for the Social Development Department at that stage, and then try to basically intervene and get Trifecta those tenders. The state says that she physically intervened in 3 lease tenders, which multi-million rand lease tenders that was eventually awarded to Trifecta. Other lease tenders were also involved in Kuruman, Uppington, Springbok, DR, Douglas, etc. So, and remember, while Yolanda Botha is no longer an accused, the Trifecta companies are also an accused in this case. So they were basically trying to map the guilt of the company Trifecta, which under South African law can be charged for the behavior of their directors if they are corrupt. Later during the day, we saw the prosecutors going through Alvin Botha's, which they said colluded basically by using another company to put in a very high tender, and then Trifecta came in with a lower tender, which then obviously benefited Trifecta of getting the tender as well. John Block, there was last year there was a whistleblower who testified that John Block made several calls to him. He was his public servant. Would then put pressure on him to basically assist Trifecta to basically get those tenders.
Ulrich, then the other one that's of interest, of course, is Ivan Matibi. He's pleaded guilty to all charges in this shocking murder, rape and kidnapping of the 5-year-old girl. It's also before the courts. Just tell us, what's the expectation there when Judge Nombulelo Pagati takes, gives a verdict, really?
Well, basically, they're in court now, and that she has started delivering a judgment, the sentencing. Quite a huge interest in that case. We saw in the last half an hour, we probably saw more than 100 people that going into court. So I can assume that court is packed to capacity at the moment. Mostly ANC Women's League members and as well members of the community. But really quite a gruesome murder. November last year we heard that Florence Barnes was gone missing. The community then immediately started searching for her. She was found the next day behind the Galeshewe police station in a veld. And then very gruesome, various stab wounds. She had been raped, head had been bashed in, and then Ivan Matibe was arrested shortly thereafter. About a week ago, between last week and this week, he actually confessed to the murders, and this is where we are now sentencing. The prosecutor in that case has asked for the maximum because of the severity of the injuries, the gruesomeness of the murder, and obviously that it's a child, and they say they get too many of those cases here in the Northern Cape.
Ulrich, thank you very much for an update. That's Ulrich Hendricks coming to you live outside the High Court there. Now let's just take a final look at what you are tweeting about. At SABC Newsroom is where we live. Spilale says, Vincent Mdungi, former spokesperson of the South African Police Service in KwaZulu-Natal, sentenced to 5 years in prison for forging a matric certificate. Wow. There, Luvuyo says, Luvuyo Mdeni, that's our very own online reporter. Imprisonment is quite a sad and shocking story considering how good he was as KZN spokesperson. Greed knows no bounds, says Luvuyo. SAPS spokesperson gets 5-year prison sentence for faking qualifications. About time we see solid action in these types of crimes. That one from Sinitamba Butelezi. Spiwe Hobasi says, I'm not for or against any judgment, but can we really compare a rape case with one of forgery? Hashtag Vincent Mdungi. And comparing it, interestingly, to the Bob Hewitt case there. That is very, very interesting scenario. now playing out. But that's where we wrap it today. Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios here in Auckland Park every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. We also stream live on YouTube at that time. Don't forget, you can watch the show back if you've just missed it. You can watch it on demand on our YouTube channel. Go to Digital News, go SABC Newsroom. It'll pop up. You just click on the live button and we are good to go. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.